30th birthday, I found myself here at the Green River Lakes Trailhead. I had traveled about 14 hours that morning from Sioux Falls, and in the morning I would embark on a trip through the Wind River Mountains called the Wind River High Route. And so this would be an 80-mile hike. I plan to do it in 5 days, and during that I spent about approximately 50 miles off trail, navigating through that. I had, before this, I had never done anything like that before, especially in that duration, and also I'd be going by myself, something I had never done before too. And so when you look at that, you gotta kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, why, how the heck, do you find yourself here thinking that you can do this on your own? And for that, when I look, at everybody here in the crowd, and part of the reason I love, being in the outdoors is when you go around, if we're all sitting around a campfire right now, I bet I could go around to every single one of you here and I could hear what I'll call like your origin story. Why you love the outdoors, why you love coming here. And I love being around people that love it, to be able to hear that. And so for me, that really goes back to 2004. When I went on my first big backpacking trip with the goal of summiting Mount of the Holy Cross. And this was I'll spare you all the details, but it went horrifically wrong. Sean's actually in the crowd here. He got to suffer through that with me, but we learned a lot. And during that trip, it really sparked a love for these high places. And as I continued to get the opportunity to go and travel in Colorado to these different summits, I started to find that all of my favorite trips were the ones where I got the opportunity to backpack during. It wasn't the ones that were the day hikes. It was the ones where I really got the chance to get out there and make a full, real adventure out of it. And so I found myself by the end of the summer of 2006, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do a long distance backpacking trek. And when my friend Tyler told me about the Wind River High Route, that sounded exactly like what I wanted to do. And so once I got the opportunity the next summer to actually go into the Wind River Range on a trail run, I became obsessed with that. That's what I wanted to plan, and how I wanted to do that first big backpacking trip. And so part of the reason, there we go. Part of the reason for that was kind of I just love the aesthetic of the trip. You start, the north end of the Wind River Range, and you're going, on trail, off trail, all the way back through here, just continuous hike through this just extraordinary terrain. And it just completely captured my imagination. I just knew that's what I wanted to do. But, taking a step back even from that, from deciding exactly what I wanted to do, that trip, just like everybody in this room, my calendar is stuffed full with personal obligations, professional obligations, running here and there. And, when you look at that, how do you fit a trip like this? I took a full 10 days to make this happen. It comes back to an essay I read back in 2016 by Brendan Lennard, and really the essence of it, because my daughter's in here tonight, I won't use it, but basically, here we go, will be the theme of the night here. Basically, it comes down to this, and in that article, what it really says is, at some point in your life, you were not busy. You could very easily take off and do the Wind River High Route or whatever hike that wants to be, but now you're not. You are extremely busy. But I bet if everybody in this room were to pull out their phone, pull out their calendar, and scroll, whether that's 6 weeks, 6 months, or a year down the line, eventually there is a spot on that calendar that's open. So great. Find that, take the amount of time that you need to do your trip, and block that off. Okay, so here's the important part about that, is you do not move that time for anything. So you take that time is a giant boulder in this creek, this dry creek bed that you found. And coming down eventually are these waters of Busy that are come back and rush around that rock. But that rock doesn't move for anything. And you have to stick to that. And so right then, right there, all of that feeling of that big trip that's always been in the back of your mind that you're always daydreaming about, all of a sudden that feeling that, you know, maybe your life's passing you by, or that you're missing these opportunities to go do this great fun stuff, is replaced by this other feeling of, I'm sure some of you have felt it before, of anticipation, of like, oh, I'm doing this, you know, I've committed to this date, and I'm gonna make this happen. And that's a hell of a lot better than procrastination. And so, when, you know, that's exactly what I did. I knew I wanted to do this trip. I went home, I talked to my wife, Kelsey. I blocked off that date in my calendar. I texted a friend that I wanted to go with me and sent in my PTO request. There you go, boom, I was going. Great. So now we get down to the fun part, which is all of the logistics of that. But before you do that, you say, okay, Brian, you said you've never done anything like this before. You know, why do you think that you can pull this off? Well, thankfully for me, there's this great thing called vicarious learning. So there are all these resources out there for us to use to, you know, be able to have the confidence and knowledge to go and do a trip like this. And so that's what I did. I poured over all of these other places. You know, Joe Kelly's Climbing and Hiking in the Wind River Mountains was an amazing resource for me. Andrew Skirka, I don't know if any of you heard of him before. He's a professional backpacker. I don't know how the heck he managed to carve that niche out for him, but he's managed to make a living being a professional backpacker. He's really good about it, and he has a ton of fantastic information out there about not only Wind River High Route, but just backpacking in general. Adventure Allen, fantastic resource online. These guys out of Salt Lake City, they call themselves the Mediocre Amateurs, which I think is just hilarious in general as in terms of a title. Had done a trip there, so I poured over all the information that they had, and then again, Brendan Lennard, who writes on that essay from under Semi-Rad. Again, another great name. These guys are extremely creative. But I poured over all of these resources that to help myself get ready for this, to feel like I was confident to go out and do that. So from there, it comes down to saying, okay, so you got all this information that you've pulled together, but you've only spent, you know, 4 hours in the Wind River Mountains, and you know, when you read some of the resources, part of the lore of the Wind Rivers is that it's really not all that well documented in terms of like turn-by-turn directions to where you want to go. And a lot of like the true guides, even in Joe Kelsey's book, says this is basically a rough layout of how to get there. I'm not going to tell you how to stay on the trail, because sometimes you have better adventures when you're off the trail. Okay, that's great, but you know, I kind of want to get to where I'm going in this trip. I kind of have, you know, one shot to do this whole, you know, 80 miles. So I'm going to try and pull all the resources that I just said, you know, talked about there, and make this trip as successful as possible. And so two of the biggest ones that were huge for me in making this trip happen is one is CalTopo. And so this is a free resource online. All you need is a Google account. But they pulled together all these topographic maps and allow you to draw your, you know, intended route all the way through. And so what I was able to do before I left was completely map out, you know, where I wanted to go. Now, was it a turn-by-turn direction? No, but it would at least give me the assurance that I was somewhat on track. And from there, there's this great app. If you don't have it and you're doing trips like this, I'd highly recommend it. Gaia GPS, and it's an app for your cell phone, and it basically turns it in to a Garmin or something else that you would get and go buy at Shields, and it's $20 a year. It worked great for this trip and others, and that GPX file that I created on this downloaded right into that app, and it was a fantastic way to kind of assure me, you know, while I was traveling, that I was on the right way. So that is a great resource and really cost effective than going buying a, you know, $400 GPS device. So highly recommend that. So now we get down to the kind of the fun part, some of all the stuff you see in here, which is all the gear. And for me, when it comes down to gear and planning, that means it's spreadsheet time. So I'm a huge spreadsheet nerd, and so you're going to get to see all of my spreadsheets now. So if you don't like spreadsheets, I'm sorry. But I also have pictures, just in case the spreadsheet doesn't do it for you. But my favorite part is the spreadsheet. This is it. This is everything I brought on my trip. And so I'll go through not every piece of equipment on there, because some of it's self-explanatory, but I'll point out the ones that were really important, for me, and some of the things that I think you could take and use on your trip. And so here's first example of said spreadsheet. So the first thing I'll talk about is the tent that I use, and not really any particular brand, but more on the pyramid shelter. This was the first time I had done a trip with one of those, and it was fantastic in terms of, one, the weight compared to my old tent, which was like 3.5 pounds, down to only a little less than 8 pounds, so just a ton of weight saving. But then also I found that it was bomb-proof in terms of the wind, rain, hail that I came across. It was extremely comfortable, and it really checked all the boxes in terms of what I was looking for, which is safe, light, and somewhat comfortable is kind of the philosophy for packing this stuff. The next thing that is really important, I think I can pass along some knowledge, is kind of what I use for a water filtration system during the trip. For me, I brought 2 of these smart water bottles, which were really lightweight, and on top I had a Sawyer squeeze attached. And that worked great. There's tons of water, when you're on the Wind River High Route. It's very rare that you're very far from a lake or a stream. So being able, carrying tons of water with you isn't all that important. But one thing that I did do that I think is a nice little tip is I had this 64-ounce pouch. And so I wouldn't keep that filled up during the day. But as I got to the end of each day, I would stop and fill that up about 30 minutes before I was done. And instead of filtering it, which can take forever to really get a lot of water out of it, I would take some of these MSR tablets. I dropped 2 in, and as the rest of my day kind of wrapped up, when I got to camp, I had just enough water to cook dinner that night, cook breakfast in the morning, and also have a little extra drinking water. So that system for me really worked well. Whatever. I know you guys don't want to see my spreadsheets anyway. The other piece of gear that I made the decision to bring for myself personally was ice axe and micro spikes. What I read online, there was a lot of people that had varying opinions on whether or not they should bring that or not, because there are 2 different glacier crossings on the high route, and some said, yeah, you can just bring your trail runners and get across it. For me personally, I erred on the side of caution and brought the ice axe and the micro spikes. That's kind of like I'm probably a little more conservative, so I did bring those, and would recommend maybe not this gigantic one, maybe a smaller one if you're gonna do something like that, but something that I did bring. In addition to that, in terms of safety, I made the decision to purchase a Spot GPS during 2018, and so what that is just a personal locator beacon. It is fairly light, relatively low cost in terms of buying the actual device. The subscription for it is a little more expensive, but for me it was that peace of mind of knowing when I'm in this remote area, if I do get into trouble, I can hit the what button, and someone will at least know where I am, and also for my family back home to be pinging that satellite that I'm still moving forward. So one of the things that surprisingly took more time than I thought was lining out all of this food that I would need to bring on the trip. And since I'd only done, 3-day backpacking trips before, I never really put that much thought into it. And so then I ended up getting really nerdy with it in terms of calculating out, calories per ounce and all this stuff. But you can see, if you draw a line, through here, most of it is just food. So you really don't need all that much stuff, but I found that, oatmeal, candy bars, freeze-dried food, I enjoyed these Pro bars that I brought, but really, you just kind of want to go, don't go for a lot of variety, just go for, calories, and you'll be burning plenty, so eat whatever while you're out there. And so, over those, months, so I said that anticipation was building up, I was getting really excited, for my trip, more spreadsheets, so we'll skip over those. And then, all of a sudden, I get a text from my buddy that I was planning on the trip for, and he says, I'm sorry, I can't go. I've taken an opportunity, he's moving out to Arizona, and now I'm faced with this choice. I've been building this trip up in my mind that I'm getting so excited for it. Now, if I want to go, I'm 3 weeks out. I can't, there's no one else I can really ask to say, hey, you got a week off and just stop your life and come out to, Wyoming with me. And so I had to decide, do I really want to do this by myself? Do I want to hike for 5 days alone? Is that even safe? Am I even capable of pulling this off, or am I gonna, is that possible? And so even up until the day before I was gonna leave for my trip, I was wobbling back and forth whether or not I was gonna go. And it wasn't until I talked to a mentor, and then my dad as well, who just said, basically, you don't know until you go. You don't know what you don't know. You gotta go try it. And so that's what I did. Some of you now might be thinking, but Brian, you said this is a point-to-point hike. You're gonna start in the north and end of the south, and now you're by yourself, and now there's just a car there. What are you gonna do? Now you're yo-yoing it, so now you're gonna do a 160-mile hike, or what's the plan here? And so that's when it came down to the logistics of pulling this trip off, and luckily it was really easy for me. There happens to be a great company out there called the Great Outdoor Transport Company, and essentially I called a stranger. I gave them my credit card, I told them I would leave my key in my gas can, and they would promise to have my car for me there when I got done. Okay. Yeah, right. Sounds great, right? Well, I'm sure some of you have kind of heard the proverbial burn your boat, and those you have not. It goes back to Herman Cortez when he landed on the beach with all of his troops and then ordered them to burn his boat. No choice but victory. We can't go back. And that's effectively what I was doing. So now I'm alone, and I'm paying somebody to come take my car, which is basically my only way out of there. Besides some other logistical nightmare of bailing at some other point. And so that only kind of added to my nerves. I didn't have an easy kind of all right, I'm just gonna go home. I'm just gonna go back. I need to at least get to that big sandy trailhead at some point. And so there I found myself, back to the beginning of the presentation. I'm sitting there, and when I went to bed that night on the 4th, I was extremely nervous. I was excited, don't get me wrong, but I was extremely nervous. So here we are. We're gonna talk about the actual IRON. And so again, like I said, I broke it down into 5 days. A lot of people take 6 or 7. You could take 20 if you wanted to, if you had the time. But for me, that's how I kind of broke it up. And so my first day, really was going to be about 18 miles, it was about 4,000 feet, and of course I'm super nervous. I wake up in the morning and it's raining. So I put on all of my rain gear, and I get ready to walk. The Wind River High Route has an extremely gentle start to it. You're not just walking straight into the mountains. And that's kind of one of the unique things about the Wind Rivers is it's kind of difficult to get back into them. Even once you get to that trailhead, really to get into the mountains, you're talking a 10, 15 mile hike to get there. And so, the first part of this day was pretty straightforward. It was just 10 miles of rain, mud, and not very many views. And so, and truly, this is supposed to be one of the most beautiful areas, so I'll have to go back someday and check that out when I can actually see something. But when I finally did, I got really excited. The skies were clearing out, the rain had stopped, and below here was where I was going to be camping that night at Indian Lake, and that was kind of the first moment where it was like, oh, this is here we go. Now we're getting back here. As I loop through here, I kind of get my first taste of kind of that alpine environment, where there's lots of rocks, and through here kind of the first taste of up, going through all these different passes that I would be on the route. And I'd be lying to you if I said that I felt great right now. I just came from Sioux Falls at 1,500 feet, drove basically through the night to get here, and just head out on basically the elevation of 8,000 feet now. I've got this giant backpack with all this stuff on it. Like, I'm beat as I'm going up this and trying to wrap up an 18.5-mile day. And as I'm hiking up, all of a sudden I feel this cold breeze come from behind me. And I look back, and there's this giant dark cloud just chasing me down. And so I throw my bag down, I throw on my rain clothes again, and I'm like, I'm just gonna just hammer for the rest of this, and I'm gonna beat this rain or thunderstorm up to the lake, and I'm gonna get my tent pitched before it hits. And I was wrong on both accounts. One, I did not beat the rain there, and two, it wasn't rain. It was a grapple storm, so even more fun. I just got hammered by hail, and so I'll show you a quick video of how much fun I'm having on my first day here as I sit in my tent. It'll load. Maybe the internet connection's not good enough.
We get to, I guess, the lake that I'm supposed to get back tonight. It's time for a fun little grapple storm, so that was interesting, sprinting up that pass to throw down the tent as quickly as possible. And I hope this doesn't last very long. We need some water, like make some dinner and all that. And not to mention there's a freaking rock. That's not going to be very fun to sleep with here. I can't remove this. So. Alright, I guess day one kind of in the books.
So I'm having a great time. But the grapple storm ended, I unzipped my tarp, and I had one of the first of many moments during this trip where I kind of said to myself, where the heck am I? Like, this is incredible. And this is what I hope, and I didn't even see this because I'm like, I had my head down, my hood up, I'm, world record, set up of that tarp to get out of the rain. But I mean, this is what I open my tent to, and it's just like, this is amazing. Where am I? So I was beat, I was exhausted, I wanted nothing more than to crawl in, but this was just an incredible place to camp. It's so gorgeous, and even if you don't want to do something like the Wind River Highway, this is 18 miles from the trailhead. This is a fantastic place to go, and the Indian Lakes was unbelievable. I'd like to tell you that I stayed up and got a fantastic photo of the sunset, but I did not. That's about as far as I made it, and I went immediately to sleep. I was exhausted. I did not make it to sunset that night. So that was it. That day one in the books, and so I, made sure to get stuff ready as much as I could. I didn't really know what that meant at this point, what it meant to be kind of ready for the next day. But the second day of this trip, for me, the way I had it broken up is there was kind of a natural choke point before going over Indian Pass, and that's where the Knife Point Glacier is. And so really I only had 9 miles to cover this day, so I let myself sleep in. I got it, and woke up in that morning with no real big rush to get going. And as I'm making my breakfast that morning, I make my first big mistake of the trip. I pulled out my pot. I did not pull out the big lighter in the pot before pouring water in there to boil some water for coffee. Yeah, not smart. The gear thing, and I got another mistake that I can talk about later about kind of backing yourself up. But for the how much an extra lighter weighs, just put one in your back. Don't be like me and hope on the goodwill of strangers that you're going to be okay. So after that fun little mistake, I kind of got back on my hike, and as I was going up to the Knapsack Couloir again, just that this morning was just more of those moments of like, this is, just like somebody painted it. Such a super beautiful area. And then, you know, as you start climbing, you got to see, you know, some of the ruggedness of the Wind River Range. And, you know, when I, you know, came around this corner, it blew my mind, you know, and I'm gonna say that a lot, but it really did.
What time of year was it?
This was in August.
Okay.
Yep, August. And so, as I topped out at the top of this knapsack pass, the next piece is the first glacier crossing, which is Twins Glacier. And I'll just show a quick video of that. But, you know, for me, this is why, you know, I decided to bring the ice axe
And down into the
and the micro spikes for stuff like this. And, you know, even with that, you know, right away, I slipped going down with the micro spikes and the ice axe. You know, I was able to, you know, arrest myself. But, you know, at this point in the day, I've made two really dumb mistakes. I've drowned my lighter, and then I'm sliding down, you know, this glacier. And I just needed to really get myself, you know, refocused on what I was doing. You know, I might have been tired from the day before, but it was kind of time to you know, get rid of some of the nerves and really get into it. You know, making it down this glacier was great, and then you get into the Titcomb Basin, which is another just absolutely gorgeous area. Now I got to go for like this beautiful stroll. You know, once I got off that glacier, and there's a, you know, amazing trail, and you know, it was just a beautiful afternoon, and I was taking my time. I only had 9 miles I wanted to cover that day, so I sat down and, you know, had a great lunch and, you know, chat with a few people that I would see here and there, and then up into the Indian Lakes. And this is where I found myself early that afternoon. It was like 3:30 or 4 o'clock, and I was already set up for camp, just sitting, you know, hanging out. And you know, one of the things that was hard about this trip, you know, more than anything, was that kind of quiet time. I have a pretty, you know, hectic life. I have, you know, I'm talking at work all the time. I'm home with my 3-year-old daughter, and you know, that quiet time is tough. And when I was sitting here, you know, being alone wasn't easy. And you know, I look at this picture. You know, for me, it was a good moment of reflection, and then also kind of why I wanted to be out there for that quiet time and coming to terms with that. And after that afternoon, even though it was hard being there, I really kind of snapped out of it. I was ready, you know, for the rest of the trip. You know, after sitting there thinking about that, and you know, who wouldn't want to be? I mean, this is such a fantastic area to be. And you know, the third day of this trip, for me, it really was the way I had it lined up, was really the crux of the trip. Going up over Indian Pass, and then over the Knife Point Glacier, into the Alpine Lake area, and then basically off trail all the way back to Camp Lake. And so, especially the fact that the way that I had it lined out was going to be about a 14.5-mile day, and that it ended up that the first 4 miles took almost 6 hours. It was going to be a long push. And so in the morning, right away, you know, straight up over to Indian Pass, and then over the Knife Point Glacier. And so Indian Pass is just back over here, and you come kind of down through there, and you'd actually see there's a party of 4 coming across. And then from there, back over, they call it Alpine Pass, into the Alpine Lake area. And this was, again, one of those moments of, where the heck am I? I just came over that, and I had an absolute blast. I'm super thankful I had the ice axe. I'm glissading down this. This was super, it was a great time saver. Absolute blast going down there. And then just navigating this area was extremely fun. So over here, you actually, it's bizarre, but you know, you actually come through here. You don't just get to go around, you get to scramble over all of these rocks down through here, and the easiest way around this lake is not through that way, but around there. And by the end, you're really kind of going, you know, hand over hand, climbing over rocks. You know, it was a navigational challenge of like, nope, don't want to go that way, I need to go this way. Again, it was an adventure getting through this part, and I really enjoyed that. Kind of was a big highlight of the trip. navigating the Alpine Lake area. And this is kind of, you know, me looking back over, you know, at the end of it. From there, you make a big descent down to Camp Lake, and so it's just kind of this cross-country travel. You're taking different gullies down. There's not really an established way to get down to Camp Lake, and so essentially bushwhacking here, there, get down to Camp Lake, reach back for my water bottle. It's supposed to have my filter on it. Oh, that fell out of the backpack at some point going down there. So there's my third big mistake in the trip. But like I mentioned before, I brought a lot of those MSR tablets as a backup. So this time I didn't have to necessarily rely on the you know, goodwill of a stranger to bail me out again. I was able to use those tablets for the rest, and it just goes back to say, you know, back yourself up on that stuff that is absolutely critical for those trips. You know, as I'm hiking, you know, one of the things that even on, you know, only the third day of doing this, you're just passing by so many beautiful lakes, and they're not even named or anything, and it's kind of like, I don't even know what this one is called, and I look back at this picture and I almost barely remember this at the end of the day, and you know, there's just no shortage of amazing views in the Wind River, and so many opportunities to explore back there. As the night ended, I came into, geez, so many lake names to remember. This is, oh boy, drawing a blank. Another pretty one, yeah. But again, just like this, you know, more of those same type of moments. And at this point in the trip, you know, I'm really starting to feel, you know, pretty confident. I'm enjoying myself. I've found kind of the rhythm of backpacking, and I'm loving it. That was my camp that night. And so the fourth day of this trip is really kind of, if you look at the Wind River Range, there's kind of like a north section and then a south, and then there's really kind of not a lot in between those. And so this fourth day really is about connecting, you know, those two ranges. And so I had it planned out, you know, to do it in a 17-mile hike that day. But you can see at the end, there's a fun little climb right at the end. Just that last mile is going to be really fun. So with how long that other day, I mean, I barely made it to camp and to pitch my tent before dark. And so I'm not really sure how smart it was to say I was going to do 18 miles in that day, but I figured, you know, I can, you know, camp wherever and give it a try. And during this section, the cross-country travel for me in terms of navigation was a little more challenging than I thought. I figured, you know, just kind of pick a line and be able to stay on it with no issue, but without some of those landmarks of it being, you know, whether that be a pass or another lake, having that distance in between those landmarks made it a little more challenging than I was maybe anticipating. And, you know, definitely lost some time getting turned around in the woods. But eventually I did finally make it to Middle Fork Lake, which again was another one of those moments of holy cow, you know, Pronghorn Peak in the background there, just absolutely fantastic. But as I sat here kind of tired from the other, you know, miles, you know, one, I'm admiring it, and two, I'm kind of like, I have to go all the way up there still today to get to my camp. And so that was kind of the gut check at the end of day 4, how I had done that. But one of the cool things during this day, on my way up and over that pass, I met 4 other backpackers that were doing the Wind River High Route as well. And so it was really cool to get to share some stories from them. And just like I said, you know, about all of you guys in this room, you know, it's great to hear and swap stories like, why the heck are you guys out here, you know, for a week, and getting to know them that night, you know, as we're filtering water was great, especially after not really having any conversation for about 4 days. 5 days if you count driving the 14 hours there. And so this is Bonneville Lake after finally getting over that pass, and then where, you know, I eventually camped that evening and looking down to the lower Bonneville Lake. You know, just another, you know, great area to be. So now, you know, I'm kind of on to my last day, and a lot of it, you know, it was weird to sit here on the 4th day think only 4 days have passed, but each day kind of felt like a lifetime because of what I was doing was so much different than what I do in my, normal day-to-day life. And so, at this point, my nerves and everything else is gone, and so I'm planning to fully enjoy, my last day in the Wind River Range. Now, I did plan it to be a fairly long day. I said I was going to do the last 25 miles in one push. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend that, but that's how I ended up timing, or my timing and logistics work. But that morning was, fantastic. The getting over, back down from the upper lake, over the pass near Raid Peak, and kind of in my thought process as I'm, going over all of this giant talus. At this point, I'm kind of like, I just want a trail. I just want to be on a trail. I'm kind of sick. I like it. It's been fun being off trail for all this time, but I just want to hike. I don't want to do any more of this boulder hopping. And when I finally did see the trail here, I was very happy. And it was just kind of nice way to, start the hike out was, you kind of got to turn your mind off. I didn't have to, worry about navigation. I didn't have to worry about getting lost. No more, jumping over rocks and all that stuff. It was just a great way to be able to reflect on the trip. And so I won't tell you about, Brian a month later, but Brian then can kind of tell you about his trip.
I'm doing some reflecting on the trip as I walk up this trail. I figured might as well say it in the microphone. It's like just like with trail running.
Right. Well, if it doesn't buffer, I was the one who said it, so I guess I can summarize it. But basically what, my thought was, it's just like anything in life, it just takes a little bit of time to get into the rhythm of it. Whether that's, a new addition to your family, a new event, or a new hobby, it's okay to, kind of struggle through that awkwardness. And I know last weekend we went and tried, rock climbing for the first time with Jeff. And sometimes it just takes that time to get comfortable with those new activities. And so don't let that nervousness stop you from doing that. Now I'm really excited because I'm going back into an area I've seen before, which is the Circuit of Towers. And now I'm coming in from a different direction. And I don't know what made that, but it's pretty cool seeing that from the backside. I don't know, it doesn't quite make sense to me. And so as I approach the backside of the Cirque, and then up and over Texas Pass, and then back into the Circuit of Towers, just absolutely amazing place. Looking down on Lonesome Lake and Warhammer Peak, and all these peak names are so cool that they Wind River Range, if they did anything right, it's the names of the peaks. They're all really cool. They definitely have Colorado in that regard. And so as I make my way out, just really appreciating the opportunity to be able to do something like this. And so Temple and East Temple Peak, I got to go back and see those. That's another fantastic area, but just a great way to end the trip, with that being kind of the final push. And I'll kind of touch on some of the things that I learned, as I wrap up here. One of the first ones is kind of a bit of a lesson in self-reliance, that I can go and I can do something like this by myself. I can learn those skills and go do that. And so if you put in, that effort, you can make your dream trip or whatever that is, happen. Another one that is going to sound kind of cheesy and maybe even self-centered, I don't know, but that I learned that I like myself. I know that sounds kind of weird, but you know, that was part of the intimidation of doing this trip by myself for those 5 days. Like, do I want to be just with me, by myself for 5 days? And I didn't know if I wanted to do that. I didn't know if I would enjoy hanging out with myself that long. Apparently I do, so I guess that's a good thing. I think I had a third lesson, but I forget it right now, so come talk to me later when I get it. But we'll see if this video loads or not. If not, I'll just summarize my thoughts again.
I just spent the last 5 days thinking one of the most incredible places. Last 5 days thinking one of the most incredible places I've ever been. I am one lucky SOB.
And so, you know, with that, I just want to wrap up with just a message of gratitude. I'm really thankful to have been able to do a trip like this, and I have a lot of fantastic memories. I look back on the trip really fondly. Now all of you that are here tonight are going to be part of that memory, so thank you very much for coming out and listening to me talk about this tonight. I'd also like to thank Nancy and the Great Outdoor Store for putting on events like this in our community that bring people together and have this information. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So just a quick round of applause for Nancy and the Great Outdoor Store. You know, with that said, if you ever have questions or want to connect, you know, outside of this event, I have my email on here. Happy to answer questions more specifically about the high route or, you know, backpacking in general. Not expert, as you've seen, I made plenty of mistakes, but I can tell you what not to do maybe. And then also, I'm fairly active on Instagram as far as social media goes. I'd love to connect with you on there too. So, thank you everybody.